Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, getting you ready for Las Vegas Summer League. The Timberwolves start play on Friday afternoon. Yes, there's some exciting draft picks from both last year and this season that are on the roster, but today I'm going to tell you about three new faces, players who are not already on the Timberwolves roster to look out for in Las Vegas. What I'm looking for as we get you ready for kind of Timberwolves basketball coming up here this weekend. It's all coming to the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody, and a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch the show on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. That can be found on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can watch this show and all the other Locked On shows in the state of Minnesota. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at my account, which is at Beecken, and that's with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right. Las Vegas Summer League. The Timberwolves entry gets underway Friday afternoon with a 3:30 p.m. Central tip. And we haven't talked a whole lot about Summer League yet on the show. I'm going to change that today and tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. We're going to cover Summer League. And I want to briefly kind of run through the roster now. Today, though, I want to focus on names and faces that we aren't very familiar with. And I want to spend a little more time Friday on like the actual overall things I'm watching for, which includes all the stuff from last year's rookies and this year's rookies. But today, it's just going to kind of be acclimating you with some of the names that weren't already in the Timberwolves system, if you will. So, like, for instance, taking a quick look at the roster, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 guys on the roster who have played for the Timberwolves in Summer League. They are Timberwolves draft picks, or they've played for the Iowa Wolves in the past, including possibly this past year. So, all names that should be somewhat familiar if you've listened to the show for the last, I don't know, going back to last Summer League, right? So I'm not going to really focus on any of those guys today. I'll kind of rattle off their, or I will rattle off their names here. So obviously Timberwolves draft picks from last year, first rounder, Wendell Moore Jr., second rounder, Josh Minott. We'll talk more about each of them on Friday, and they're going to be a big focus of Summer League, definitely. Another name that should be pretty familiar if you've listened to the show the past couple of years, Brian Bowen II has been on the Iowa Wolves. He actually didn't play for them last year. But he did 2 years ago, and he's been on their Summer League team each of the last 2 years as well. And now he's back this year on the team. DJ Carton was on the Iowa Wolves this last year. Javonte Cook was on the Iowa Wolves this last year. Philip Wheeler is another player who the Wolves reportedly initially signed to, I think the first report was maybe a two-way deal about a little over a year ago. And then I don't know if that was wrong or if they changed their mind, but basically they ended up he was on an Exhibit 10 deal. He played in Summer League and then played for the Iowa Wolves. But Philip Wheeler is on the Summer League team again this year. And then Matteo Spagnuolo, who, of course, was also somebody who the Wolves acquired the rights of last year on draft night and played overseas again this last year. We'll talk more about him Friday as well. But those 8 guys are all familiar faces and names if you've been around these parts for the past year or so. There are 9 guys on the roster who have not been a part of the Timberwolves organization in any way, shape, or form in the past and are new. So I want to actually, the way I want to structure the show today is I'm going to start with the number one player that I'm most excited to watch in Summer League that's not already a roster player, right? So not Minott, not Moore, I didn't even mention the rookie either. I didn't even mention Leonard Miller. Jalen Clark, of course, is on the roster but won't play. But Leonard Miller is the other obvious one, right? We'll talk about him Friday too. So not including guys who are already under contract with the Timberwolves, but new faces who I'm most excited to watch, who I'm most intrigued by. And this is always a bit of a dangerous exercise because the minutes distribution in Summer League is bonkers. It's all over the map. There were a couple guys last year that I called out as being excited to watch. We saw them play heavy minutes like in game one, and then they didn't play game two or whatever. Obviously the Wolves go into this. Every team goes into this with a plan. There's guys, I don't know how much communication is going on with these guys. Like, hey, you're probably not going to see the floor much at all, or, you're going to play heavy minutes, or if it's just hit and miss. So, I mean, hopefully the guys I'm picking actually see some run. But anyway, my number one player that I'm most excited to watch that is not a current Timberwolves roster player playing for the Wolves in Summer League is going to be Trevion Williams. Trevion Williams played for Purdue in college. He was a 4-year player for the Purdue Boilermakers and started majority of the games in his second and third years there, which were the two years kind of bookended by COVID. Came off the bench for a lot of his senior year. Now Purdue had a lot of big man talent, always does, it seems like. But over the course of his final 3 years, when he was a regular rotation player and averaged at least 20 minutes per game, he averaged about 13 points, 8 rebounds per game for Purdue. Shot 53% from the field, didn't really have range on a three-point shot, shot a handful of them his senior year, 5 of 14, so 36%. But Trevion Williams, the calling card for him is his rebounding, number one. And that's, of course, an area that will struggle in greatly. He's a big. He's about a 6'9" center, good wingspan. He's not a great athlete, but again, he's an extremely strong rebounder. And you go back and look at scouting reports from a little over a year ago, and there were people saying he could have been the best player available in the draft, or excuse me, not best player in the draft, best passer available in the draft as a 6'9" center, power forward center, right? Like, his passing ability is incredible, and he's a fantastic rebounder. He's he's a solid defender, not a rim protector, not super mobile on the perimeter, but I think there's some of the passing acumen kind of plays into the overall basketball IQ. It seems to really understand defense, but not super mobile, and was not successful in drop coverage at Purdue either. Now, we don't know he played a couple of games in the G League last year. We don't really know what this looks like now. Has he improved in pro style defensive coverages, right? Because what Purdue is doing isn't necessarily exactly what he was doing in the G League. And I'm sorry, I said he played a couple of games. He played in 29 regular season G League games last year. 8 rebounds, or 8.3 points, 8.3 rebounds per game. Continued to rebound the ball extremely well. Last year in the G League, a 23% defensive rebound rate and a total rebound rate of greater than 15% for Trevion Williams. At the collegiate level, even more dominant numbers. Total rebound rate for his 4 years in college, 21.6%. Defensive rebound rate, 26.1%. Those are massive numbers. This is a big-bodied guy who knows how to use his body on the glass. He knows how to pass the basketball in post-up situations. And Purdue used him a lot with his back to the basket. And obviously, that wouldn't be his role in the NBA very often. However, Chris Finch likes bigs who can pass. And I'm not at all saying that, I should have said this off the top. It's really unlikely that any of these guys I'm talking about today end up on the Wolves in a legitimate, certainly in a rotation capacity. But remember, it was just a couple of years ago, or I guess now more than a couple of years ago, but not long ago, when both Jordan McLaughlin and Naz Reid entered Summer League without roles on the Timberwolves. Jordan McLaughlin was undrafted, had been in the G League the year prior, and it was based on his Summer League play that he ended up getting a two-way contract that year. Naz Reid was going to be offered a two-way contract, but based on his Summer League play, again, as an undrafted player, the Timberwolves actually offered him an actual partially guaranteed NBA deal, similar to their own second-round pick, Jalen Noel. So it was Summer League that got Jordan McLaughlin and Naz Reid jobs in the NBA. Naz just got paid. He just got paid, an average annual value of $14 million over the next 3 years. And Jordan McLaughlin has earned himself a few $1,000,000 of guaranteed salary as well, because it all started with what he did in the Summer League back, I guess it was 4 years ago now. So, somebody like Trevion Williams, the Wolves, they technically could still have a roster spot available, and that's likely why they haven't made a decision on whether to sign Jalen Clark to a two-way deal or a full NBA deal, or how they're going to handle the end of the roster. But technically, the Wolves are letting Nate Knight they're letting Nate Knight go, right? So they could still have that last spot available. Trevion Williams is the type of guy who, because of the rebound ability and the passing ability, he's an intriguing fit. Again, the limitations come from the athleticism is modest, the defensive ability, you worry about his mobility in space. And he doesn't have much of an offensive game besides pass. I should rephrase that. He's a good post player, but he doesn't have a jumper, right? He's not going to do a whole lot for you beyond that. He doesn't really have much of a face-up game, although he had some flashes at Purdue because he tries, crazy passes sometimes. He can be turnover prone. So the main issue is the modest athleticism, the limited offensive game, and some of the defensive problems. But the rebounding and the passing ability are two things that Chris Finch would love to have on the roster. So Trevion Williams, I think, is a high floor type guy who has a shot at cracking an NBA roster, maybe being, the last big, on a two-way deal. Similar, I guess the Wolves already have Garza now on a two-way deal, but a couple of years ago, it was Nate Knight, right? So Trevion Williams is a name to keep an eye on for the Wolves in Summer League. All right, there's two more guys that I want to highlight, and then a few more I'm going to quick rattle off that you should be familiar with on the roster, and that's what we'll do here on the show, or the rest of the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and sometimes in life we're faced with tough choices. The path forward isn't always clear, and mental health is something that should not, but sometimes does take a back seat if we're busy, if we're tired, if we're both of those things. And if you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy can help you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. And you're going back, I guess, 3 years now to COVID year. That kind of, a lot of us reset, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And that kind of helped me reset myself and understand that, like, hey, I need to focus on my own mental well-being sometimes. If you're thinking of starting therapy, consider giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. A big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, every day. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to continue talking Summer League, and I want to spend some time talking about what to watch for from Timberwolves roster players. More Minot, rookie Leonard Miller, Matteo Spagnuolo, what to expect from some of those guys, some familiar faces, and what we should keep an eye out for throughout Summer League. I should also mention, I failed to do this off the top today, that the Timberwolves Summer League rosters or Summer League entries being coached by Timberwolves assistant Max LeFevre. And Max LeFevre has been on the Wolves. He was actually hired as an assistant, player development assistant and video coordinator back during the Ryan Saunders years. So leading into the 1920 season was a Gerson Rosas hire. He had been at Texas Tech, and of course the Wolves had just drafted Jarrett Culver. And so there was a little bit of that Culver-LeFevre connection. And then thankfully for LeFevre, even though Culver was traded and obviously moved on, LeFevre stayed on in that role. And then before last season was promoted to an actual assistant coach role on the bench with Chris Finch. Of course, had worked for Saunders and Rosas, and now with Finch and Connolly. So good for him to get the opportunity to coach the Summer League team. So I did mean to say that off the top, because I good for him. I know the Wolves have done this a few different ways in the past, how they handle coaching Summer League. So, all right. Other names that I'm excited to look for. Number 2, Trevion Williams is number 1. Number 2 for me is Faren Hunt. And let me make sure I'm saying that right, because I remember looking at the pronunciation and being surprised at how it actually was pronounced. I believe it's Faren Hunt. Man, I lost it. Anyway, yeah, it's Faren, because it looks like it should be Faren, but it's actually Faren. Faren Hunt is a defense first wing. Yeah, it is. Faren Hunt last year actually played a couple of games for the New York Knicks. And he was he was at SMU is where he played, Southern Methodist in the and he played 3 seasons there, graduate or left school in 2021. Got into a couple of games last year with the Knicks, has bounced around a little bit, signed some 10-day deals, but only appeared in those 2 NBA games. And his calling card is defense. He's an athlete, an incredible athlete, 6'8" wing with a 7-foot wingspan, super athletic, one of the more athletic guys that's been in the G League the last couple of years. He's an impressive defender. Probably would have to be considered the best actual all-around defender on the Summer League roster. I know the Wolves have high hopes for more, and obviously Josh Minott as well. But Faren Hunt, 6'8", 7-foot wingspan, ultra athletic, a really good shot blocker for his size and the position he plays. And of course, he's got that experience in the G League on top of his experience that he has at the NBA level. In college at SMU, his last season there, he averaged 11 points and 8 rebounds per game. Never was a 3-point shooter, which is one of the main limitations. Again, as a 6'8" wing, you expect that there's going to be a little bit of punch from the outside. Not the case with Faren Hunt. In the G League, the last couple of years, so last season in the G League, he averaged 14.6 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, and only shot 27% from 3. The year prior in the G League, 18 points per game, 7.5 rebounds per game, and 36% from outside the arc. So he's trying to develop a little bit of a shot as a professional. And again, it's gotten him a couple of cups of coffee. He signed a couple of 10-day deals with with the Mavs a couple of years ago, or I'm sorry, he was at camp with the Mavs a couple of years ago, signed a 10-day with the Pelicans, didn't get into a game. And then last year was on a 2-way contract with the New York Knicks for a chunk of the season, for really the end of the prior season, the start of the following year, and only got into those 2 NBA games. So he's a high upside type guy because of the athleticism, because of the wingspan, the size, intriguing to see what he might be able to bring to the table. He's still only 24 years old. He played 3 years in college. And because of the upside for all of those other, and also like, go back and watch some of his tape at SMU. He's a good finisher at the rim. He's a good cutter. All those kind of like intangible type things you can do, not really intangibles, the off the ball, the ancillary stuff you can do offensively. He's good at those things. The problem is he's not a great shooter. And, there isn't much else to his offense, right? Like he's not a great passer. It's really more he's good off the ball. He's good finishing at the rim when he does get there. He's good in transition. He's a fantastic defender. So I think what intrigues me the most is those high upside type skills. And then also the fact that there's always room for guys like that, right? Like the Wolves could always use a guy that they could be their 12th, 13th guy who in a pinch can go out there and try and get a stop at the end of a quarter, like almost how the Wolves used Josh Minott a couple of times last year. That type of a role. Again, unlikely he ends up landing a 2-way deal with Minnesota, but I like the idea of yet another athlete with chops defending on the ball and also off the ball. A lot to like with the profile of Faren Hunt. So another name to keep an eye on. And again, one of the few guys in the roster that has actual NBA experience. Yeah, it's like 8 minutes over 2 games, but he's got 2 full seasons worth of G League experience, a lot of pro basketball experience, and somebody to definitely keep an eye on. So that's Faren Hunt. The third player that I'd mentioned to keep an eye on in Las Vegas in a Timberwolves uniform would be Brandon Williams, who's a really interesting story. He played at the University of Arizona, but left after the 2019 season and had some injury stuff. And then, of course, COVID happened. And so he was trying to kind of recalibrate and get ready for the draft. Ended up, of course, going undrafted, but played quite a bit for the Portland Trailblazers at the end of the 21-22 season. So if you remember, that was when Portland was pretty shamelessly tanking. Dame was on the shelf. They were trying to, get a good pick. He actually started 16 games. Brandon Williams did for the Portland Trailblazers in late in 2022. Was not good. It was not efficient. He shot 37% from the floor, 29% from 3, 13 points per game, 4 assists per game. Struggled defensively mightily. Bad assist to turnover. Couldn't grab a rebound. Undersized, really, for an NBA point guard at times. But then he went and he played in the G League. He did quite a bit that year, actually, prior to going to Portland for the Westchester Knicks. And then this last year as well, he played for the College Park team in the G League and averaged 20 points per game. upped his 3-point percentage to 36% and was much better at the G League level. Assist to turnover looks much cleaner. His profile as a player was a pretty well-rounded point guard, just a little bit undersized, and he was a really good college player. He's got a knack for scoring, and I like not a great defender. Again, inefficient at times, but still has some upside because he's younger, because he doesn't have a whole ton of actual pro basketball experience. But he's really kind of more of like, he profiles a third point guard type player. Very unlikely he ends up getting a contract with Minnesota, but we could see him running the point because, again, he's got 20 plus games of NBA experience, has started 16 NBA games. We may see him get some run as perhaps a starting point guard, perhaps somebody that's initiating a lot of offense with the summer league team. My guess is it's him and Matteo Spagnuolo. There aren't many other actual point guards on this team. And really Spagnuolo is more of a combo guard wing anyway, but I think we'll see him initiate a lot of offense. So keep an eye on Brandon Williams as well, even if he's the longest shot of the three to end up with an NBA job, or at least with the Timberwolves. I want to hit like 6 more guys, a couple of whom may sound familiar based on their backgrounds. But like 6 more guys to keep an eye on that aren't already on the Wolves roster. And then Friday, again, we'll get to the guys who are under contract with the Wolves for next year. So we'll do all that here next. All right, thought I'd rattle off a few more names. Actually, really the rest of the names on the roster that aren't under contract with the Wolves. Brendan Adams, he was at college, or in college, he played 3 years for UConn, played really off the bench mostly for them, transferred to George Washington, was a starter, and it really didn't have an impactful collegiate career until year 5 this last year with George Washington, averaged 17 points per game. Before this last year, I should say he's a guard, 6'4" guard. Before his last year in college, he was a 27% 3-point shooter, and then out of nowhere, he shot effectively 38% this year for George Washington. So all of a sudden could score the basketball, all of a sudden could shoot, decent size, does not have a good defensive reputation. So Brendan Adams, to me, I guess he's another guy who could see some run initiating offense. He's more of an undersized 2 guard, I think, than he is a point guard. But Brendan Adams, a 5-year college player, the cliff notes on him didn't do much until his last year of college. We'll see if he can do more of that in summer league against, pro level type competition. Chris Bankston is another one. I considered putting him in my top 3 as somebody I'm interested in. I probably should have, actually. He's probably got a better shot at getting a contract than Brandon Williams. But Chris Bankston, 6'8", 6'11" wingspan, super athletic. The intrigue with him is that he does a little bit of everything. He's kind of almost a stocks like a do stuff guy, steals, blocks, deflections, rebounds, undersized for the NBA because he's not like, he doesn't have any range. He doesn't really have a jumper at all. He played 5 years in college. Parts of 6 seasons in college and attempted 7 3-pointers. 5 of them is his final year at Norfolk State. He doesn't have a jumper. He's not a true big, but he's 6'8", 6'11" wingspan. A little bit in that regard, it reminds me of like well, I don't know. He's not really Kenneth Faried. Faried had a little bit more of an offensive game. But anyway, Chris Bankston, undersized, but super athletic, like kind of freaky athletic, very long. I'm excited to see him play. At Norfolk State his last year, had 14 points and 7 rebounds per game, shot almost 70% from the field. In fact, over parts of 6 collegiate seasons, he shot 70.8% from the field. He's obviously just attempting shots right around the basket. He's a solid rebounder for his size. You'd like him to be a little better given his wingspan, athleticism, and the fact that that's how he's going to be that's his shot at being an NBA player, is being a do stuff guy, as I like to say. But I think he should be fun to watch. I hope he gets run as well, because I think he's an intriguing player. Jalen Galloway, I don't have much on him. He's a 6'6" wing. He's athletic. He's from Australia, or I'm sorry. Yeah, he's from Australia. Played in Australia this year. Like, if you watch highlights of him, there's not a whole lot out there. He looks the part in terms of his actual profile, but I didn't think he looked that impressive or explosive against pretty mediocre competition. I don't know much about Jalen Galloway. I'm going to be frank. So we'll see if he gets any run. But he's a 6'6" athletic wing who played in Australia this last year. A name that might sound familiar, Theo John, who's a Minnesotan, went to, I believe, Champlain Park High School. Yeah, Champlain Park High School, played for 4 years at Marquette, then transferred to Duke, not this last year, but the year before. Had kind of after being a 3-year starter at Marquette, playing heavy minutes, not putting up a ton of numbers, but a solid player, transferred to Duke. It was kind of a bit player off the bench, and then got hurt during the pre-draft process last summer. I think had a workout with the Timberwolves last summer as well. And he's trying to, he had like a brief cup of coffee in the G League this year, but didn't really play much because of whatever injury he had. It was like a knee or something he had a little over a year ago. So he's working his way back into shape. The college numbers are not going to be eye-popping. Again, 5 years in college, he averaged 5 points and 4 rebounds per game. For a center, you'd really want that rebound number to be higher. I guess he's really more of a power forward, but he's a really good screener. He's very physical. He's big. He's strong. He's an intelligent player. The Wolves like good screeners. You really want him to be a better rebounder, but he's an intriguing story. And of course, he's from Minnesota. I'd be surprised if he got heavy run here in summer league, but then again, he's a 5-year college guy, played at Duke, has some, and Marquette, 2 good programs, and has a reputation as being a strong physical presence. Maybe he will get a little bit of a chance to play in Las Vegas. A couple more names. Sam Wardenberg, 6'10" big, really more of just a stretch big, played at University of Miami, and then this last year played at the in the NBL in Australia. And he's originally from New Zealand. And this last year in Australia, he averaged about 11 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, shot a hair under 37% from 3. In college, he was actually a pretty big part of some good Miami teams, the end of his career there. His final year, his senior year there, he started 34 games and averaged 8.5 points, 4 rebounds per game, but shot 42% from 3 his senior year. Overall in college, 37%. So he's a good 3-point shooter. He's one of those guys where, like, he's 6'10" and he can shoot it. But if you're going to be 6'10" and not be great in many other areas, you got to shoot it better than 37%, right? You got to be 40, 41, 42% for that to, like, really hit home. Now, a lot of stretch bigs aren't great defenders. He's actually not too bad. If you go back and watch him in college, I thought he was pretty decent as a defender. I don't know that he's got an NBA future, but he's pretty good in Australia this year, and that's decent competition. So he's worth a look for sure. And I'd be interested to see him play a little bit in Vegas. Cook Yat. I know it's Cook. I believe his last name is Yat. Cook Yat, 6'9", has a 41-inch vertical. He doesn't have any high-level experience. He is from Alaska, like moved to the lower 48 to try and get collegiate experience. Went to DePaul, but never actually got into a game for them. I'm not really clear what happened there, but he never played for them. Played for Overtime Elite the last couple of years and doesn't really have much of a professional basketball record. But because he's such a freak athlete and the fact that he doesn't have, like, he didn't play a ton of basketball growing up. That's part of the reason why he moved down from Alaska, was to play more and play against tougher competition. I'm sure teams think he can be moldable, and anybody that's 6'9" with a 41-inch vertical, you want to see what you have. So another player I'd be pretty surprised if he saw much run. It feels like he's one of those guys that the Wolves said, like, hey, we want to get a look at this guy in practice and see if he's got potential, if there's any way we could convince him to play at Iowa or whatever. But Cook Yat, if he gets into a game, let's expect him to try and dunk on somebody, right? He's still relatively young. He just turned 20 a few weeks ago. So still relatively young as well. So Cook Yat, I don't think Yat will play a ton of minutes. I don't know that Theo John will play a ton of minutes, but the rest of these, or Jalen Galloway for that matter, but Brendan Adams, Chris Bankston, Sam Wardenberg, all names that I'd keep an eye on as well, that otherwise we may not be familiar with, except for that they're on the Timberwolves Summer League roster. On Friday, as I mentioned earlier, I do want to talk a lot more about Wendell Moore Jr., Josh Minott. Who else? Obviously, draft pick Leonard Miller, and some of the other guys who were on the Iowa roster last year we might have seen in Summer League as well. So we'll focus on that, and I'll give like my top 3 things I'm looking for. The Wolves play Friday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. That's actually on NBA TV. You can watch it. And then they don't play again until Monday. So Monday, we won't do another show after. We're not going to do like a post-game pod immediately following Summer League Friday, but Monday's show will be takeaways from Friday's Summer League game and then getting you ready for that evening. The Wolves play the Summer League game number 2 for their preliminary round schedule, Monday the 10th. So this next Monday, 9 p.m. on ESPNU. That's game 2. So then we'll do post-game pod on Tuesday. And like that'll be really most of next week's shows will be related to Summer League. Hoping for some key like actual takeaways from Minot, from Moore, looking for growth. Excited to see Spaniolo for the first time in a year in a Timberwolves uniform. So a lot to get to here in the next week on the show for sure. That's all we have for you today, though. A big thank you for watching and a big thank you for listening once again. Of course, you can watch the show on YouTube. You can also download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku or Amazon Fire TV and watch it there too. And of course, you can listen wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can find this show. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken. That's with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Podcast Network is your local experts on all your favorite on all the biggest stories, I should say. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.